Hello Internet, Seth Skorikowski, and welcome to part 4 of our review/game diary for the Pulp Cthulhu campaign, The Two-Headed Serpent. Today's thrilling episode will cover Chapter 5, Iceland. The scenario itself is 26 pages and took us 2 full sessions to complete. However, a lot of that time was spent doing the New York chapters both before and after the Iceland portions. Buckmeyer wasn't present for the first of those 2 sessions. He made his grand appearance halfway through the adventure, and once we get to that point, we'll go over what it was he was doing while he was missing the first half of the scenario. In the meantime, our heroes will consist of Jane Darling, Patch Emmett, and JJ. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. Lots and lots of spoilers. So players, unless you want to ruin the surprise, I suggest that you stop here. Alrighty keepers, now that the disclaimer's out of the way, let's get to it. When we last left our heroes, they'd been contacted by the New York Mafia wanting to know about some warehouses that Caduceus owned down in Red Hook. Worried that this was possibly some plot by the Inner Knight, or worried that the mob might accidentally discover what Caduceus was doing and discover the mythos, the heroes decided that they were going to inform Dr. Goncalves about the Mafia. Unfortunately, Dr. Goncalves was away at the Meadham estate for some time, which gave the PCs a little bit more time to work on improving their own skills or continuing their own individual research. Jane was busy trying to discover some way to get all of these scales off of her chest, while Patch was busy trying to learn anything and everything he could about the Serpent People. Patch discovered a memo that appeared to have been accidentally placed in a wrong folder somewhere, and the memo, which was from Frank DeLuca, discussed several strange things, including a temple that was evidently located at the Meadham estate, as well as some hybrid dog creatures that Caduceus was involved with. But before Patch had a chance to discuss this with the rest of the heroes, Dr. Goncalves returned from his trip and called the group together for a meeting. However, before Dr. Goncalves could start that meeting, Jane and JJ decided to tell him about the mob.
So get this, the Mafia wants to pay us $1,000 just to get some dirt on you guys. Yeah, they're convinced you're smuggling drugs in Red Hook or something like that with some warehouse that you got there. Completely untrue, I'm positive of that. But hey, what a laugh, am I right?
Goncalves became visibly concerned once the PCs told him about this, and he called in Frank DeLuca into the room, and the PCs had to repeat their story to Frank DeLuca several times over. The players then made some psychology checks, and they realized that both DeLuca and Goncalves were trying to hide something.
Holy crap, they really are hiding something in Red Hook, and we just tipped them off, guys.
Goncalves told the PCs that they did the right thing by coming to him, and DeLuca said that he was going to work on getting some information together that they could then pass to the Mafia once they returned from their next mission. He then visited the quartermaster, Philip Connors, about getting some paperwork. Now, the PCs missed most of this conversation because it was through a door, but Patch was able to make a lip-reading roll through the window through that door, and he was able to figure out that Connors was being ordered to fake some shipping manifestos and documents, and that he evidently had no idea what was going on down in Red Hook. Meanwhile, Dr. Goncalves started their mission briefing. The briefing room is said to be laid out with several maps of the Icelandic peninsula, as well as Snæfellsjökull volcano, as well as several woodcuts and different pictures and illustrations of Icelandic trolls. A little Google searching is going to find you some different illustrations that you can use, as well as photographs of the rock formations that gave rise to a lot of the Icelandic troll folklore. The module says that Goncalves won't explain the troll pictures unless the PCs specifically ask about them, but screw that. Have Dr. Goncalves be up front. After all, he is sending them on a mission. He wants to make sure that they've got all the information that they need. So he's going to tell them that, hey, this volcano looks like it's about to blow. The Icelandic government is doing an evacuation in the area, and they've asked Caduceus to help out with that. The Inner Knight is probably using an old serpent person facility that's there. You remember that facility that you saw when you're in North Borneo? Yeah, well, this is the facility that you saw on the big map that was in North Borneo. Inner Knight's probably doing something there. Oh, and by the way, people are reporting that there's some troll sightings in the area because trolls, in truth, are actually these things called vormies that the serpent people used to use as slaves, or they used to abuse as slaves, and some of the vormies got out, and now we call them trolls. So, by the way, that's what's going on. Then that just makes more sense that that's what Dr. Goncalves would tell them. So have him freely give him all this information in the notes, and then he's going to dismiss the entire group except for the party leader, or who he assumes is the party leader. In our game, he chose Jane Darling because he has the most rapport with Jane, so he's just kind of assumed that she's the party leader. He instructed her that if she thinks that the base might not survive this eruption, if she thinks the volcano is going to explode, that she needs to locate the control center to the base and recover one of the metal canisters inside. That way Caduceus might be able to figure out what it is the Serpent people are up to. Once that's done, the PCs are then whisked away to the airport where they are immediately flown to Iceland, landing in the Caduceus aid camp that's then helping out with evacuations there. There they meet with their guide Gunhildur. She is a useful NPC to help relay information, lore to the PCs, as well as serve as an emergency backup character in case one of the other PCs gets captured or killed. Have her mention very early on that she has a brother, she's very close to her brother, and he lives in one of the local villages, and she'd like to go and check out and make sure that he and his family have evacuated. Keepers, make sure that from the moment the PCs arrive in Iceland until the end of the game and their time there, that you mention that the ground is rumbling, there are small quakes, fissures are opening up in the ground, sometimes they're releasing smoke and steam. Don't let the players forget for a moment that this is a place that feels like that it might erupt at any time. As the PCs are making their way towards the volcano, they're going to be attacked on the road by a giant vormis. This is one of those monstrous, half-petrified creatures, and just the sight of it alone drove Gunhildur insane. Now, the module seems to assume that the PCs are going to fight and chase this thing, so let's break this monster down. It has over 60 hit points, 18 points of armor, it gets multiple attacks around, and its damage bonus is 6 die 6. This thing is bad news.
Which means JJ pretty much crawled over Gunhilda, who is still sitting in the driver's seat, screaming her head off, right? So he's like leaned over there, driving that truck out of there, and she's all screaming in his ear.
Between the difficulty of the road conditions and a penalty dice because JJ was basically leaning over Gunhildur, who was still in the driver's seat, he was able to make all of his drive checks and was able to get out of there pretty well. Meanwhile, Patch was in the back of the truck with his rifle, and Jane was in the back of the truck with JJ's Lewis gun, and they were laying a lot of fire down on him, and they probably would have gotten away too. However, I then rolled an +1 for a rock that vermis threw, and that pretty much took their truck out.
And if we hadn't actually watched him roll that +1 with our own eyes, we wouldn't have believed he really did it.
The PCs managed to kill the giant vormis, but the amount of armor that it has, without rifles, killing this creature is going to be very hard for characters. JJ's Lewis gun was instrumental in being able to take it down. Keepers, this monster could easily wipe out your party at the very beginning of the adventure if they are underprepared or if they find themselves unable to escape. So be very careful when using it because wiping out your party at the beginning, that's no fun. Nobody enjoys that type of game. Inside the Vormi's lair, they discovered a petrification kun, a powerful piece of serpent person super science. And one of my player characters pretty much said,
"Wow, this looks like it could be really useful in taking down larger threats. This could be really valuable for us, guys. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick this gizmo into my inventory, and we are never going to discuss its existence ever again. Ever."
The PCs made it to the village only to discover that it had been ransacked and everyone in the village was gone. Desperate to find her now missing brother, Gunhildur wanted to follow the tracks that then led up the mountains. But the PCs managed to talk her down because they were still really banged up after that fight with the troll, and they were able to say, let's do this in the morning. However, they did discover that one of the regular Vormis in the ruin of one of the collapsed buildings that had fallen down on it, and JJ instantly blasted this thing with a shotgun the moment that they knew what it was, and then Jane pointed out that it had a serpent person slave collar that seemed to be shocking it, and the Vormis was obviously a slave to these creatures, and JJ felt a little bad about shooting it then. The heroes managed to talk the wounded and terrified creature down and got the shocker collar off of it. They then spent the rest of the evening trying to communicate with this creature.
Yeah, we never understood what his name was supposed to be, so we just nicknamed him Tripod, because, well, I'll explain when you're older, but he was a big boy, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, Tripod, he was totally our buddy.
The next morning they followed the Vormi home, bringing with them several sheep that they had gathered around the village. Between bringing their new friend with them and the offering of food, the Vormis allowed them access to their cave warrens. There they witnessed the funerary rites before a great carving of Tasagawa. They encountered an imprisoned serpent person overseer, which then pulled Jane down into the pit with it, and that led to a great fight. And they watched the Vormis hurl their dead into a strange abyss that appeared to be breathing. They were able to determine that the serpent person facility that they were looking for was on the opposite side of the abyss, but crossing it was going to be difficult, especially when two serpent person guards began attacking them in the middle of their crossing it. Now these guards are riding around in modified transportation spheres, essentially half spheres that are floating around, I guess kind of like the Jetsons. Now one of the things that I changed about these modified spheres is that I reduced their speed. The unmodified spheres can go upwards of 300 miles an hour because they're meant to fly around the world. However, these half spheres are meant to be flying around inside of a building, so I kind of toned their engines down a little bit. They're not going to be filled with a fluid that's supposed to stop the momentum, so I figured these vehicles aren't designed for that. So for my game, I changed the modified spheres down to about a max speed of around 20 miles per hour because they're inside-only vehicles. So now instead of moving like souped-up Lamborghinis, they moved more like souped-up golf carts. Patch took one of the half spheres for himself, and he spent much of the game zipping around inside of it. Now this required POW checks to maintain control as he was moving around during fights or trying to take sharp turns, but he managed to not hit anything the entire time he was zipping around the complex.
Yeah, more on that in a bit.
The Serpent Person compound is huge, many of these passages being over 20 feet wide. The module says that there are 40 serpent people here, but only specifies the locations for a few of the scientists and various guards in the different rooms. I suggest that keepers go ahead and assign out where all the serpent people are at the time the PCs enter the facility. Not just the serpent people, but also the serpent people overseers. You can then move them around as they react to what the PCs are doing and different things like that. But like with any dungeon and any role-playing game that I do, I like to note where everybody is once the PCs enter it, and there I can track where they move and how many of these I have used and everything like that. So it's just easier that way. Just note it all down on your map and it just runs a lot smoother. In addition to the normal serpent people and room descriptions, there are several suggested encounters that they can have, and I used most of them when I ran this adventure. Also remember to mention all of the volcanic tremors, lights going out periodically, alarms sounding for no reason at all, and everything to show that this is an ancient installation that is within a volcano that looks like it's about to explode. The heroes managed to find all of the human prisoners, including Gunhilda's brother, but they weren't able to open up the cells. However, JJ's attempt to blast open one of the cells with dynamite set off the alarm and had a lot of Serpent People guards come, and that led to one hell of a great fight. As the heroes worked their way deeper into the complex, they discovered the Overseer breeding vats. JJ took one look at this and went indefinitely insane. Combined with his new phobia towards needles, JJ decided that this room needed destroying, and the only way to do that was with high explosives.
Okay, guys, I got 6 sticks of dynamite, 2 anti-personnel mines, and you are not going to talk me out of this one. Cover me.
JJ leaped into the room, crawling across the floor as robotic arms with needles tried to attack him from above. Many of those were actually just delusions because, once again, JJ was crazy, but there really were some robotic arms with needles that were trying to stick him. Occasionally, half-built overseers would pop out of the vats and try to attack, but the rest of the party standing at the doorway quickly took them down with their rifles with extreme prejudice. After crawling through the room in a crazy path reminiscent of a family circus cartoon, JJ placed his giant bomb, made the demolitions check, and got the hell out of there. The resulting explosion nearly sealed the passageway outside, which would have split the facility into 2 halves. In fact, the explosion did 148 points of damage, and I had determined that it was going to take 150 points of damage to do that, so they were really close. The explosion rocked the entire complex, absolutely destroyed the Overseer facility, and it caused the power in the entire complex to go out for 30 full seconds.
And on the bright side, that loud alarm finally stopped blaring at us. I mean, that thing was deafening.
Still on his rampage against Serpent Person super science, JJ led the team to the environmental suit room. I think the environmental suits are probably the coolest and most horrifying thing in the entire campaign. I don't mean this adventure, I mean in the entire campaign, the Two-Headed Serpent, the environmental suits are the coolest and darkest part of it. Essentially what they are is the serpent people, being reptiles, can't survive in the cold climes of Iceland without any sort of help. So they take people, and then injecting them with all sorts of magic science juice, they then hollow them out, rip all their guts out, and turn them into like these living suits that the serpent people wear. But the suits kind of look like giant idiot babies. So they look like these big fat bald babies kind of ambling toward you with these slits down the front, and maybe the head flipped back and a serpent person head sticking out. They are dark and they are cool, and the people, when this is done to them, are completely conscious and aware. It is horrifying and nasty, and I love it. Now, after thoroughly wrecking the laboratory here, that ended the first session. Now, for the next session, we were able to do it with a full group, which means they were joined again by Buck Meyer. So real fast, here's what Buck had been up to. Using his talent for chemistry and weird science, Buck managed to get work with Caduceus trying to replicate the 5 deadly venoms. Working with another player character, Max Stone, they worked with several zoos trying to gain access to certain snake venoms. But one night, several other their contacts were murdered and robbed. Caduceus was able to determine that the Internet agent, or agents, they weren't quite sure how many there were leaving New York and traveling by the RMS Adriatic. With orders to recover the venoms and stop whatever plan the Internet was up to, Buck and Max were given first-class tickets aboard the luxury liner. From there, it was just the transatlantic terror scenario from Goodman Games and written by John Hook. I've already reviewed this scenario, so if any keepers find themselves in a spot where they might need it, the adventure can fit very easily into the Two-Headed Serpent as a side quest, as long as you change the setup and how you approach it. Once the ship arrived in Belfast, Max headed back to New York with all of the serpent person venom, and Buck was given orders to then move on to Iceland, where he was supposed to meet the party. Now, the next part I told the player about, we didn't actually roleplay this portion out, and that was Buck made it to the village in Iceland. However, the PCs had already left, so he followed the trail that the raiders had taken back up the mountain, and then he ended up at the front of the Serpent Person facility, where he ended up being captured. So the next session actually opened with the heroes seeing a group of serpent people coming down the hall toward them. They got 2 Vormies and an Overseer, and they also had Buck Meyer tied up and protesting because he'd been captured and he didn't know what was going on. So after a daring ambush and rescue, the entire group was back together for part 2. Now, in the landing bay, they managed to take a serpent person prisoner. His name was Chessois.
Yeah, I am not going to be remembering that name, so we're just going to call you Szechuan. And Szechuan, you're about to help us get all those prisoners out of the other room, or we are going to splatter Szechuan sauce all over the walls.
Once the human prisoners were freed, Szechuan led the heroes to the control room. It was while crossing this bridge over a lava river that disaster struck. Crossing it only requires a dex check, no big deal. Failure means that the player doesn't actually fall off the bridge into the lava. It means that they fall and they grab onto the edge of the bridge, and then they have to make a strength check or a climb check in order to get out of this situation. No big deal. It's really unlikely that something bad is going to happen there, which means it was extremely unlikely and weird when Jane was the only one that actually made it across, and JJ, Patch, and Buck all failed their rolls and were hanging off this bridge. Jane then had to crawl back in order to save them, but the bridge then collapsed under the full weight of the entire group that was on it, and Patch and Jane ended up falling into the magma. Patch survived that, however, Jane died. Fortunately, she had 30 luck and managed to recover. However, the major wounds that she sustained from her burns, as well as some major wound that she had sustained in the fighting earlier, means that she had climbed 2 degrees in her serpent person hybridization. And when she came back out of the lava, through some miraculous miracle of why she didn't die, she had advanced 2 full stages.
Yeah, I have fangs now.
In addition to the fangs, Jane's entire body was now covered with tiny, subtle scales. Needless to say, she was a little upset by this.
What? More scales? Are you f***ing kidding me?
From here, the heroes entered the control room, where they made their first contact with Rose Meadham, daughter of Joshua Meadham and leader of the Inner Night. The encounter with Rose should have been more dramatic. And while the keeper's notes and the plot talk all about Joshua Meadham's daughter and their history and why she left Caduceus and formed the Inner Night, there really isn't a set place that tells the player characters about this or where the players get to learn all this. Now, I allowed that the players were able to make intelligence rolls and their characters were able to recall a lot of information about Rose and know who she was. But keepers, I strongly encourage that long before you run the Icelandic chapter, you mention Rose early on. Mention Meadham's daughter, who helped found Caduceus with them. Put all this in the level 2 briefing pack when they first kind of get to level 2 briefing at Caduceus. Mention that Rose then went missing. Maybe there were rumors that she was killed by the Inner Night. Maybe have the PCs get some gossip later on that not only was Rose killed by the Inner Night, but one of the serpent people there then stole her likeness and had been walking around pretending to be Rose Meadham. And that's why Joshua Meadham hates the Inner Night just so damn much. That way, when the PCs meet this creature that's saying that it's Rose Meadham, whether it is Rose Meadham or not, whether they believe that or not, it is a bit more of a big reveal rather than a, who the hell is this? Now, Rose is on this giant wall screen, and she is going to gladly tell the PCs that Caduceus isn't what it pretends to be, and that Caduceus is actually run by serpent people. She informs them that it is a front for a serpent person plan, that Joshua Meadham himself is a serpent person, and if they don't believe her, they should go down to Red Hook and check out what's going on down there. Now, Rose then offered to help the PCs out if they might want to get a little revenge against Caduceus for lying to them.
Hey girl, is there anything that your side can do about this? Because if so, we gotta talk.
Now, while Jane was trying to milk Rose for any information, I mean, she is a grifter after all, that's what she's good at, Buck was watching all the monitors, and he watched this animation of all the volcanoes on Earth, exploding in succession over and over again like it was some sort of orchestrated thing. And then on another monitor here, he saw a continent outside of South America, an eighth continent. And that was a little bit strange, but it reminded him of the time they saw an eighth continent back when they were in the North Borneo labs. Then he also noticed that on a map that had showed the Icelandic peninsula that they were on, that there was a giant creature along the coastline, and it was one of those giant monstrous vormies, half petrified, several 100 feet long, and it looked like it was about to wake up. And if this woke up, it was going to wipe out the entire coastline and possibly wipe out large portions as tsunamis went across the Atlantic Ocean. This was a bit of a horrifying revelation for him. So with little time to spare, Jane then got the phone number to contact Rose Meadham once they got back to New York, and the PCs hustled onto the control room where an elaborate network of brain cases served as the central computer. They managed to remove one of the brain cases, but doing so sparked the self-destruct sequence. With only minutes before the entire facility exploded, they made their way to the landing bay. Buck figured out how to program the automated machine to be able to load the PCs into it and fill it with the fluid and then program it to fly to New York. So JJ left that way, and then Jane left that way, but Patch decided that he didn't want to escape the same way that everybody else was doing it, so foregoing the fluid, the oxygenated fluid that's supposed to help him breathe and prevent him from getting hurt from the violent acceleration, he decided to fly the sphere back through the facility the same way that he had entered. However, Patch then failed his POW check, and he flew the sphere directly into the wall at 300 miles an hour, killing him instantly.
Oh, it's okay, Patch. You got more than 30 luck, right? Right? Patch? Buddy?
Distraught by Patch's sudden death, Buck programmed into the auto system, loaded himself into the sphere, and flew the hell out of there. However, before he made his escape, he witnessed firsthand as the giant sleeper Vormy rolled over as it began to wake up, and then the volcano exploded, killing it instantly. But the whole sight, combined with seeing Patch die, had really drove him partially insane. The eruption then sent tsunamis all down the North Atlantic coast, pummeling parts of Europe as well as Canada, and the heroes arrived home exhausted and a little bit paranoid that their employer might not be on the right side as the way they thought. Overall, I really enjoyed the Icelandic chapter. It is a lot of action and a lot of fun, and it really moved the overall plot of the campaign forward significantly. The big suggestions that I have with running this adventure is to be very careful with the giant Vormy at the very beginning. Note on your copy of the map where everything in the compound is. That way you don't have to waste your time looking for it during the game. but most of all, lay down the foreshadowing for Rose Meadham early. I really do wish this campaign had made some sort of handouts on the orientation package or something else that PCs could discover while researching the Serpent people, and I could give that to my players. But since the module doesn't provide any of that written history or anything like that, you as the keeper need to provide it to your players. So give them the history of the Meadham family, give them the history of Caduceus, and make sure that you pass all this information to them very early on. That way they know who all the players are, and the introduction of Rose Meadham feels more like a big reveal to them. Well, that is it for this episode. The next episode, we're going to be exploring Red Hook, as well as the secrets hidden beneath the Meadham building in Part 5, New York City.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you want to see some more episodes in this series or some of our other videos like game reviews or RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, heroes, you have a great day.